This is the IVJ podcast for the week of Monday, November the 4th, 2024, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. As I discussed with Visit Indy's Chris Gall in last week's podcast, one way you can judge the health of a city is the number of cranes on its skyline. One of the biggest contributors of cranes over downtown in the last 2 years has been the $4.3 billion IU Health Hospital campus under construction just south of Methodist Hospital. It's a generational development for that side of downtown, but IU Health officials want to make sure it doesn't overshadow the many needs of historic neighborhoods to the north and to the west. For several years, the hospital system has been planning an initiative and nonprofit organization known as Indy Health District. It focuses on 5 neighborhoods with a total of about 9,000 residents who, due to a number of socioeconomic factors, have a much lower life expectancy than people who live in other parts of the Indianapolis metropolitan area. It would be relatively easy for leaders of the district to simply offer these folks completely unfettered access to world-class health facilities, but their ambitions are much greater. The district's leaders want to find solutions for most, if not all, of the issues weighing on these neighbors, including housing, transportation, land use, safety, and food deserts. IU Health has opened the district's leadership ranks to several high-profile nonprofits in the district's boundaries, as well as to neighborhood leaders. It's an incredibly ambitious undertaking that's a bit difficult to wrap your brain around. It also prompts a healthy amount of skepticism. So I've invited Jamal Smith to lay out the plans for us. He's Executive Director of Indy Health District and Executive Director of Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships for IU Health. And he's no stranger to the impediments to success and good health that the residents of the district face. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Jamal Smith, Executive Director of Indy Health District and Executive Director of Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships for IU Health. I know you've got a lot going on, so I appreciate you making time for a conversation today.
Absolutely, Mason. Thanks for having me.
So I want to ask you about Indy Health District first. Folks in Indianapolis now are probably aware of the massive construction project taking shape south of what we know as Methodist Hospital. It's a $4.3 billion development that will be a hospital campus for Indiana University Health, running between 16th Street and 12th Street. It'll be finished hopefully in 2027, although some buildings look like they're ready to be occupied right now. The new hospital will consolidate the existing Methodist Hospital and what we know as University Hospital, which is on the IU Indianapolis campus, just about a mile and a half away. New complex will include a medical office building and the Indiana University School of Medicine's education and research building. So there it is, one of the biggest construction projects in the history of the state, but we're here to talk about the district, which isn't a big construction project, but in its way is one of the most ambitious health initiatives in the city's history. If you can, give me the elevator pitch for the Indy Health District, and then I have a blue million questions that we can ask.
You can't talk about the district without mentioning and referencing the new medical campus. It is, as you pointed out, and it may be the single largest investment that any of us will see in our lifetime. And you say, well, okay, why is that important? Well, the work of the health district is designed to address all of the social ills, the social impediments, the social determinants of health that frankly have been in existence for quite some time. And candidly, the neighbors, the community members have been asking for reprieve for many of these things for quite some time. And there's tons of reports to document that. Neighborhood quality of life plans, Your Life Matters reports, you name it. All of which over the decades, and I went back to as far back as 1999 to pull out some of these reports that all list very similar recommendations. We need affordable housing, not enough childcare, education is inadequate, we need affordable housing, etc. But those reports get put on the shelf and very rarely does anything happen. The health district is designed to execute on all of those recommendations and actually bring some life to those asks that have been coming from the community. But for the new medical campus, you could argue that we would probably just be having another conversation about those ills, which makes one, the health district unique not just needed, but unique. And the medical campus, the catalyst for a lot of the work that we hope to execute on here in the coming days, months, and years.
Yeah, I know IU Health CEO Dennis Murphy is known for saying, if we only build a great hospital, can you finish this one for me?
Then we failed.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And shout out to Dennis, Tori Castor, all the leadership at IU Health, because candidly, I don't know if they had to do any of this, right? They deliver healthcare very well. In fact, better than most. And most of the social impediments that we are looking to address don't involve clinical care. The fact that within the health district, there's no grocery store, and you can argue a lack of access to healthy food. IU Health doesn't operate grocery stores, but that access is important to the bottom line. And so the fact that IU Health has taken on the charge of not only establishing or investing in the work of the district, but convening the other anchors and making the community a priority, I think needs to be commended. So shout out to them.
Beyond just saying, hey, folks, we have a big hospital here, and you're welcome to come by anytime, and we'll help you with the generational problems you have with health and income. It is less inviting people into the campus as it is helping people where they are.
Absolutely. So the district is, by no means is it to replace. There are 5 historic neighborhoods that make up the Indy Health District.
Can we do them real quick? Because I was about to ask.
Yeah. So Crown Hill, Meridian Highland, Highland Vicinity, the historic Flanner House, Holmes, and Ransom Place are the 5. And there's, when I say a ton of just history and culture embedded into that place, and some influences that the anchors have historically not been so great, right? So the Indy Health District is not there to replace that. That would be a misstep, I think, on our part. But instead of that, it's there to support. And like I mentioned before, execute on what those communities and other communities like those have been requesting. And again, as equally, if probably not greater, I think a deserved shout out to, those neighborhoods and the neighborhood association leaders who have been demanding of that kind of support and not having something done to them or even for them, but with them, which is important. So we appreciate them tremendously and hope that the continued engagement brings out that kind of input, the health district flourish. So we're excited about that.
How many residents is that in the 5 neighborhoods?
So currently there's a little over 9,000 people who live in the health district space, but there's a little over 30,000 who travel in and out of that footprint on a daily basis.
So what do we know about the health of the people who live in these neighborhoods? How is that different from 46220 where I live?
Great question. I think you're softballing me here, man. Well, that leads me to what we consider to be our North Star for the work that we're doing, which is currently the life expectancy. And so if you live in that space, the data says that you are currently scheduled to die, not get sick, not sprain an ankle. They're scheduled to die 20 years prior to folks that live just 8 miles north, east, south, or west for the most part. And much of that has more to do with social and environmental factors than it does even access to the hospital itself, which was alarming. And candidly, right, that's a big needle of a North Star. And that's going to be a slow needle to move if we're sincere about it. I always say, look, and I'm sure we'll get into conversations about displacement and gentrification here in a little bit, but you can tell I'll move in some affluent folks and then broadcast to you next month how amazingly different the life expectancy is. But that would, one, be out of focus and disingenuous and not the mission of the health district. So we want to support the people who have been there, living there in those communities. And in order to change that North Star, it's going to take some time. Now, that means that there are other metrics that feed into that North Star that we want to address. The lack of housing and affordable housing, education, workforce development, like I said, childcare, the lack of green space and pocket parks, like all those things are part of the design of the district. And as we execute or implement on those, we want to be able to track that progress as well.
What health issues are common to the residents in those areas?
It's the age-old adage, right? So you've got folks that are suffering from chronic disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, but some of them may not even be disease. It's like, we have an elderly population that's living in the space. And so how do we support them so that they can age in place respectfully? And we're trying to figure those things out as well.
We can look at the data. I mean, that goes back, at least 20 years. We know it goes much farther back, but it would exhaust us trying to find it. If you asked me what I thought the issues for those neighborhoods are, I would tell you pretty much what you just told me. Taking on so many issues at once sounds crazy.
Yeah, I've been told that a couple of times.
Right. So given that we all have known what the problems are, and, many people with good intentions have talked about them, how are you guys going to actually do it?
Yeah, that's the sad part. Again, I go back to the but-for factor. And again, shout out to the anchors. So I think there's a uniqueness about what's happening right now. The health district is what would be considered an innovation district. And that's not a new concept. But the footprint is large, Meridian being the eastern border, all the way up to 36th Street, comes down on the western side, down MLK, Doglegs left or west, around the creek, and then butts south of the new medical campus around St. Clair. Over 1,500 acres. So from a geographical size standpoint, if you will, it's one of the largest in the country. But it's also, to your point, one of the more comprehensive ones, because most innovation districts are specific or niche or focused in nature, right? It could be specifically innovation that they're focused on, or it could be an education district where education is their focus. The Indy Health District is all of the above plus fill in the blank, whatever that plus is for you. So it's all the things. And folks say, well, you can't boil the ocean. So you say, well, if we turn on enough burners and leave them on long enough, damn it, I think it'll start to heat up. And I think the but-for factor, which is the new medical campus, has breathed, again, a lot of energy and resource into that space. So the Indy Health District, Inc., which I should note is a separate 501c3, it's a nonprofit, whose responsibility it is to steward the work of the district, supported by the anchors and the community of the space. And so as best we can, we want to influence that development and ensure that it is in alignment with what the community has been asking for, what the data represents, and what helps people, ultimately live a healthier, safer, longer life in that footprint.
So when I first heard about the health district, or my first thought was, okay, they're going to provide these residents with some kind of priority access to services at the hospital. But that may be the case, but it really isn't that at all. This initiative is not necessarily about delivering services. It is about all the different ways you can impact a community's health. As you really have said. And so I believe that there are 6 prongs to this, and maybe you can give us some examples. Example, equitable socioeconomic impact.
So yeah, equity and access is a big part of it. Delivering state-of-the-art, top-notch healthcare is a piece. Get research to back the data and document what we're doing is also, I guess the framework of the question you just asked is, even though IU Health has kind of pioneered the effort, it is so not about the hospital, right? It would have been easy enough for IU Health to be like, oh, you know what? We deliver healthcare. Again, we don't operate child care centers or grocery stores. Good luck. Some institutions will even go so far as say, we'll set aside some grant money and let everybody apply to that and see how you do. And hopefully you change those things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they said, no, we're in it. Even though we may not occupy that lane, it's important to the overarching health of everyone, whether it's clinical support that you need or not. And our investment, be it resource or time or expertise, is just as valuable. And so that investment, again, convened all of the other anchors. Shout out to the other supporting anchors, Ivy Tech. I know you're probably going to get to this later. Ivy Tech, Citizens Energy, the Children's Museum, School of Medicine. Looks like they're coming on board too. And kudos for them to coming on board, rowing in the same direction, took the lead from the community and all the things that they were requesting, disaggregated the data and all those reports that we pulled off the shelf, and then came up with those guiding principles, socioeconomic and equity in it. Those guiding principles came by way of that convening. And that's the lens that we look through whenever we are determining what, when, and how to invest in the district.
So it's not all emanating from 16th and Illinois. You have, a lot of well-established partners, organizations, some not-for-profit, mostly not-for-profit.
They're all not-profit, actually.
Yeah, that are going to be pulling just as hard. But there will be, a controlling intelligence, if you will, or a guiding intelligence.
More of a guiding.
And that is the district. Which itself is a not-for-profit.
Yeah, and it is too a not-for-profit. And what's funny? I think that there too is the other piece of the uniqueness of this effort, in that you have 5 right now, and probably growing, 5 major anchor institutions. You have the leaders of 5 historic neighborhoods who have all come to, and I think about this, all have come together in agreement and willing to row in the same direction at the same time for the same reason.
Is there some sort of board,
Yeah.
if you will?
Yeah.
You have a board of leaders.
Yep.
There's a major intelligentsia that makes decisions, knows what's going on, and collaborates.
Yep. Indy Health District, that 501c3 is supported by the anchors. They make up the board along with the representation of the 5 neighborhoods. And we're still going through some of the nuts and bolts, and who knows, the board may grow in size, but the anchor institutions stood it up. They serve as the supporting anchors and the board founders. And then, of course, the 5 historic neighborhoods round that out. And then collectively, we're working to figure out who else should be on that board.
And some other areas you're looking at, for example, land use, obviously a huge issue. Some neighborhoods, you have a lot of vacant land, poorly deployed land, transportation, getting to and from work, getting to and from education. That's something you're going to be trying to move the needle on as well.
In different modes of transportation, not all cars. We've been able to partner in the investment of a trail that's coming down Capitol. That was a collaboration between Near North, the local CDC, IU Health, the hospital, and the city of Indianapolis, right? Begin to give people alternatives, bike trails, walking trails, all that's a part of transportation.
At some point, I assume all of this is going to take some money.
Yeah.
What kind of budget do you have? How are you going to address how much it's going to cost to move the needle on any of this stuff?
Yeah, I got to compartmentalize a lot of that, right? It's massively expensive. But not just that, with time too. I mean, it takes some time. Interestingly enough, one of the questions I typically get is, all right, so what's your timeline? When's this going to be done? Well,
yeah.
If I figure that, that's like the magic sauce. It's like the Benjamin Button juice, right? Because we're talking about solving the world's ills. And I don't know if I were a betting man, and I'm not, I don't like to gamble. But I'd imagine that I'm not sure we'll live to see the social determinants of health, those social impediments, those things that we're trying to fight against disappear. But hopefully the work that we're doing, we're successful here in the district, and they can be replicated in other parts of this city, other parts of the state, again, potentially other parts of the country.
But again, where does the money come from? And how much are you going to start with?
I mean, all the anchors have pitched in. Some of our philanthropic partners are pitching in. How much is it going to take? I don't have the answer for that. I just know that it is incredibly expensive to do what we are attempting to do. I can speak to some of the investments that we've made currently, and those are, I mean, you're talking when it's all said and done, the hundreds of millions of dollars just to get going, right? Housing alone is incredibly expensive. Like you can spend it upwards of, for a multifamily, you're at $100 million just in that and of itself. So just think about that, multiply the fact that in that footprint alone, I think the last data I saw said we're short just shy of 1,500 housing units, right? So whether that's single family or multifamily, just 1,500, we need housing. And so you can just do the math.
Is it just as simple as the district organization just paving the way for some developer to come in and build?
Yeah, no, that's
build 3 sets of 500 unit housing projects?
Yeah, no. Every element of need is nuanced. So housing was, when we took the survey and all of, just not the surveys, but the listening sessions and all of the engagement that we did with the community, housing was the second most consistently mentioned need. In general, it's housing. But when you dive, it's the housing diversity. So you need affordable housing, but if you go talk to the community, they'll tell you, we don't want you to build just all affordable housing. In fact, I remember as there was some talks about one of the developments, multifamily developments, we had a community member say, I hope you're not building Cabrini Green. That's all I see is multifamily affordable units, and it feels, and I go, and if you know anything about Cabrini Green in Chicago, that didn't feel good. But the message was well taken. And so the mix of housing is important. So we'll need some affordable. We definitely need some affordable. We need kind of that middle market. Some people call it workforce housing. We also need market rate in the space, but we don't need all multifamily. We need some single family homes. We need some condos and townhomes and duplexes. And depending on the historic makeup of each of those 5 neighborhoods, we need to be sensitive to what that housing structure looks like in the neighborhood. You know, the Ransom Place, we're not about to build big multifamily units down there, and those neighbors will run you out of that neighborhood if in fact that's what you're pitching. So all of that thing is a mix. So just having a developer giving them money and say, hey, come in and build this is not the way to go. So some of that planning is going to take some time. We got to be intentional about it and make sure that it makes sense.
Well, that's something that you could do through the district leadership board is figure out what kind of housing you need, where it is, how much it would cost and find someone who is willing to do it.
Yeah. Well, we're not at a shortage for developers wanting to come in and do the work. Trust me. I'm tripping over developers all the time, and good folks. And that goes to the spirit of partnership. I usually deliver this message too for all the folks that want to get engaged, whether that's through single volunteer moments or big business developers or otherwise who want to get engaged. We say, look, this work it's going to take a collaborative effort, but we're looking for less transaction, less return on investment and more return on mission. So the ROM in this case is just as, if not more important than the ROI. And so even with the developers, we're having some honest, candid, upfront conversations about the nature of their intentions and ensuring that it is in alignment, again, with the mission and vision of the health district.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and my interview with Jamal Smith about Indy Health District. I know IU Health, as we've been discussing, doesn't want this to be a top-down solution. So how have you been involving the residents?
So that started day one. We've done and continue to do a myriad of just listening sessions. So we've done a ton of one-on-ones. We've met with the neighborhood association group, some of our faith-based leaders in that community, a lot of the local small nonprofits in the space, some of what we call like our neighborhood mayors. We've had lots and tons of conversations with them. We've elicited surveys and opinions from folks, and then we'll take that down and then we'll go back to them in the same manner and say, hey, I believe this is what we heard. Can you confirm we're on the right track? And they'll say, yep, or nope. Here's really what I was trying to say. Cool. We'll take that back, digest it, compare it to what the data has been saying, to your point, for years, right? And that's how we came up with what considered to be the priority list of things in the district. And that's a long list, as you can imagine. The top 5 things listed, most frequently requested: food access. There's no grocery store in that space, 1,500 acres, there's no grocery store. But food access in general. 2 was housing. 3 was safety and security. 4 was childcare, and then workforce development rounded out that 5. And some variation, those were always the top 5 things.
The first one was food access?
Yes.
There have been some really fascinating stories recently in some of the not-for-profit press about how difficult it is to run grocery stores in food deserts, and that the economics of it are so difficult. The economics of it tend to push prices higher than you're going to get at Dollar General, and people eventually just go, well, I'm going to go to Dollar General. So I don't envy you.
Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one because that is the number one requested thing. So food access is the number one kind of overarching piece. Within that specific category, a grocery store has been the most requested piece. And we're learning as we're thinking about how to deliver on that it's not as easy as, donating land and popping up a grocery store. There's been examples of folks doing that and it failing, right? And so one of the things that we want to make sure we prevent doing is giving the community something that 12 to 18 months later, we have to take it away, or it's taken away, or it's falling apart, right? So how do we make a more strategic and intentional investment into what that request is, being a grocery store, in a way that is sustainable and is there for the foreseeable future for the community, is the way that we're going. In the meantime, we've got a crew of folks trying to figure out how we deliver on something to satisfy that need for healthy food access while we are determining or figuring out how to pop up the grocery store.
When you approach neighbors about this stuff, you're having community meetings about it, how difficult is it to get across what you're trying to do? Because I'm just going to bring up IBJ's most loyal commenters. When they see stories like this, they think, oh, this is super nebulous. They want to see dollar figures. They want to see buildings. The people that you're talking to, your stakeholders in a sense, how difficult is it for them to grasp this?
It's getting better. The very beginning is extremely difficult because, look, we're not the first people or organizations to approach them, acknowledge the fact that problems exist and make them promises about something that's going to be delivered. Let's be candid. And telling them that's going to be different they look at you with a side eye, like, sure. But I think one, being consistent. I think seeing the new hospital come on board, like if you're anywhere near 16th and Senate or Capitol, like you feel it. You feel that energy. And then we've been able to deliver on some of the things. One of the requested things was a trail. Let's deliver on that. We execute. Housing is a big one. 18th and Illinois, we work with a developer to put up the Wesley Place, which is up and running. Working with Near North at 22nd and Illinois. Right now, they're doing the remediation. You see ground moving. So there's things happening there. So we are executing. So it's getting better, to answer your point. But as they should and deserve to do, approach it with a little bit of skepticism. But I think that a skeptical approach is easing a little bit as they see things come online. And we've been consistent with our approach and our cadence. We're not going away. It hasn't been like a one-time, I just want to get your survey and you never see us again. And our commitment is that we are continuing to do so. In fact, shout out to Center for Leadership Development. We're going to host the next community stakeholder meeting on November 20th at 4:30 at CLD, which is the next iteration of, the ongoing community conversation about how we're doing, what should be next, how they're feeling, et cetera, et cetera. Those conversations are getting better.
How many of them are saying, what I really need is cheaper healthcare? I hate going to the hospital because it's going to cost me too much money. I don't like going to doctors because it's going to cost me too much money. You guys are a hospital. Can you just give me free healthcare? Can you give me cheap healthcare?
I don't think I've gotten that once.
You're joking.
Not one time.
That would be my first question.
Not one time. I do get it's not convenient. Or we've had some conversations about the experience, and sometimes it hasn't been up to our standard, and we've had to address those. I haven't had how come it costs me too much at all. And I'm not saying that that's not a thing, but candidly, when you're talking to folks in the community and they're looking for a grocery store, and not to say that the cost of their healthcare is not on their mind, it may not in those moments be at the top of mind, or they're making decisions about whether I actually take a job and I need to find a place to leave my child because I can't afford childcare. That hasn't been the top of mind. So I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm saying that we haven't been hit with our health district discussions. We haven't been hit with that question or that concern. We need more childcare. We need to afford my home, more affordable home housing. I got to go out of my way to get groceries. Can't afford that, or can't get to it, or it would be nice to have in my neighborhood safety and security, which is a broad term too, because usually when you bring up safety and security, most folks will think you're talking about homicides or gun safety and things of that nature, which was some of that. But oftentimes it's, hey, Capitol Avenue feels like a drag strip. I can't cross the street. I don't feel safe crossing the street. Fix it.
I got 2 words for you. Road diet.
There you go.
I live on Kessler. They just put us on a road diet. I could not be happier. Sorry.
See? So yeah, safety and security is the thing, but I'm hearing more of those things, and I honestly haven't, and I'm not saying that is not a thing or that it might not be on some people's list. It just hasn't been at the top of the list when they're talking to me.
I'm a guy who comes to a meeting. I'm a 57-year-old grandfather. I'm raising my 10-year-old son. I've got heart issues. I'm not in love with my son's school. How's my life going to change?
I have heard some of that. Not a grandfather, but that was the actual case. We have a grandmother who was, for all intents and purposes, raising her grandchildren and having some issues with some of the schools and wants better options for schools. So how's it going to impact your life? Well, education, access to a quality education is a focal point of the district. So how do we support, improve the schools that are there? How do we figure out what schools are needed and add more if need be? And all the way down to pre-K, which includes the childcare conversation. So that's how it will change your life. The sad part is most of these things we're not going to wake up for next Friday and all these things are going to be standing up. So some of it's going to take time. And for that young lady, we had to figure out an intermediary way to help support her. But she led to examples of what needs to be done. And the idea is that folks coming behind her don't suffer from the same issues as we build out the district.
So how do you know whether or not you're doing a good job?
We're working with the Fairbanks school. Well, a couple of things. One, the community is going to tell us because we have some missteps. And this is the thing too, we have to talk to the anchors and our corporate and philanthropic partners so that they don't develop what I call corporate ADHD. Because I think that's what happens a lot of times historically is like you don't want to mess up. And so they're reluctant to go in and push your chips to the table. And the truth is you're going to miss some. Your completion rate is not going to be 100%. But you have to be willing to own it, reconvene with the community, fix it, and keep pushing. And that was a message that we got from them. So the first part of the answer to that question is the community is going to tell us in their way. They're going to let us know anecdotally whether we are on or off track. The second thing is we're working with Fairbanks School of Public Health and the Polis Center and others to make sure we're tracking the data. So whereas I mentioned before, the North Star is life expectancy, knowing that that's a big needle and it's going to take some time to change. What are the other inputs that feed into that? And how do we track those in the short and midterm, right? So it could be how many housing units do we put online? How many of those are affordable? And then how does that impact life expectancy? What's the gap in the childcare space and its affordability? And how many childcare seats do we put online and affordable child seats? And how does that impact life expectancy? The lack of green space. How do we add more pocket parks and walkable and bikeable trails? And how does that contribute to the mental and health and well-being of the people? And therefore, how does that impact life expectancy? So on the website, if you go indyhealthdistrict.org, shameless plug, we are building out our data metrics and dashboard that's going to allow people to see that in real time as well. So the community and others will be able to plug in and see how we're doing. It's in the beginning stages, so it's not up yet. But the goal is to be able to track those things so that folks can see the effort, see the contributions, and see how we're faring over time.
And again, just so I get the healthcare piece, there is a healthcare piece to this.
Yeah.
So again, I'm the 57-year-old guy who's got super high triglycerides, and I got trouble, man. Where can you help me get better care?
Anchored by IU Health. IU Health and the new medical center is going to be state of the art. It's going to be the best place and space for you to go and get that health care. Everything being consolidated into that space means it will be more convenient and efficient for you to do so. And the way we're building it is to ideally ingratiate the community so it's not just stark difference between community and hospital, right? And so hopefully that cultivates better relationships with the hospital and therefore allows us to provide better health care for the community.
To kind of wrap things up, I wanted to go back to something that we were talking about before we got on the microphones. When you're going through meetings for this kind of thing, I mean, it reverberates for you in a different way than maybe other people in the room. And it has to do with how you grew up. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I am, and I've been blamed for this and being really, really passionate about the work. And I can't deny it. I am. And partly because my upbringing is the illustration of the people we're working to help, right? So all the things, the educational experience which needs to be better, being able to afford where you live and not have to bounce around from house to house, moments, being raised by a single mom and moments in, I think she was at the time, she's on minimum wage at the time, I think it was like $5.15 or something crazy. So, thinking about workforce development and giving her the opportunity to better her lot in life and make a better wage would have been better. Being in a safe environment, just thinking about all of the cautions that mom gave me raising me and my brother in the moment that were just precautionary tales is the wrong word, but demands, if you will, like you must do this. And she delivered it in a for our survival kind of a tone, right? I was latchkey kid, pin the key on me, don't touch it to your right and let no one know that that's the case. It's just not speaking to and being able to read the room. And in essence, honestly, too, I'll say that it really helped me develop some professional survival skills, if you will, being able to read a room, to be able to dissect and detect someone's true intentions when we're having a conversation. And some of that came from being brought up in the space where the smile wasn't indicative of your intentions, and being able to read that was critically important. And having a mother who's working 2 jobs and trying to figure it out, having to teach her 10-year-old to have that discernment, I can only imagine that. And so there's folks dealing with that now. When I spoke to the young lady who was raising her grandchildren, like I could feel that in her voice. Like that wasn't some transitional tale that she was giving me that, let me go look that up and see how that feels. Like I remember vividly the tone in her voice as she's telling me what she's going through and the decisions she's having to make about whether she keeps working, knowing that one of the kids was young enough for childcare, and she's having to make that decision and what that was looking like for her and the complications it was creating for her current job. Because I remember the moments when my mother was losing a job because she had to leave and come pick up me or my brother are dealing something, and the leniency of the grace, if you will, wasn't there at that time. And so for her to make a decision between my job and my child, it's not really a decision, but then it puts her in a trick hole, right? To figure out how to make ends meet. And then you're kind of back at square one. Those real moments, man. So yeah, I am passionate about it, unapologetically so. And part of that is because I have lived much of what we're trying to address. And I wish in those moments that there was someone, some organization that was building an infrastructure that allowed for a better life for my family at the time. And candidly, to be blessed, and praise God, that I'm on the proverbial other side of the tracks. It's almost, I feel like I'd be irresponsible not to do the work that I'm doing, or at least not be sincere about it in the way that I am, given the opportunity that I've been given.
You know, we're going to have you on a second time, I think, because we haven't even talked about your career that led up to this, which is outstanding. I mean, super interesting and unusual career. So
yeah,
anyway,
a lot of twists and turns.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. No, anytime. I've been blessed. Indy's been good to me. I always say I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, but I've grown up in Indy.
Well, thanks again for making so much time. I really appreciate it. And I hope to have you on sometime here in the near future.
Looking forward to it.
My thanks again to Jamal Smith. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are a few stories in this week's edition of the IBJ that I want to draw to your attention. First up, rolling out a food truck might seem like a relatively easy way to get into the eatery business, but licensing in central Indiana can be as confusing as a 9-way intersection. As Daniel Bradley reports, food truck operators are required to make applications and fork over fees on a county-by-county and sometimes city-by-city basis. Also in this week's IBJ, John Russell investigates the extended delay in construction of a hospital announced for the Discovery Park District at Purdue University. And Susan Orr explains how local banks are competing for customers with cash offers. Again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at ibj.com. I will say it is quite a bit easier to access all of our latest local business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business community and economy if you're a subscriber. And we're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months, just to get a sense of how valuable and original this content is. Just go to ibj.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.